A man is falsely accused of sexually assaulting his own children, and he is brutally tortured and murdered over it. It is a heinous story out of Australia that we break down with professional predator catcher Chris Hansen. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. So we're actually going to do something a bit different right now. We are going international to this absolutely insane, sad, disgusting crime out of Australia. Bradley B.J. Lyons was kidnapped, tortured, and killed by a group of vigilantes who apparently mistakenly believed that he was a pedophile. You see, Lyons, the way the reporting goes, his wife, Jana Hooper, had falsely accused him of sexually assaulting the couple's daughters. And yes, this was a lie. Reporting indicates that Hooper had allowed a group of men to enter the couple's home, attack Lyons, throw him in a truck where he remained for over 20 hours in the hot sun. He was then taken to a shed where he was tied down to a table, tortured, including by being threatened with a chainsaw. He was beaten, doused in hot water, really sadistic stuff. And then apparently the effort was to try to get a confession out of him. And Lyons was then shot in the head by Albert Thron. Now, this is the leader of this gang known as the Australian Freedom Fighters. Thorne, I should say. His name is Thorne, who reportedly had this deep hatred of predators. And it's being reported that meth may have played a role in all of this as well. Now, Lyons' body was found bound and buried in a shallow grave sometime later. And after the killing, the group had apparently celebrated at Thorne's place, and Hooper and the kids were there. Now, Thorne recently was sentenced to life behind bars. Reporting indicates that he wouldn't be up for parole until 32 years from now. So he's 58 right now, wouldn't be up for parole until basically his 90s. Justice Andrew Tinney said if Thorne ended up dying in jail, there's only one person to blame, himself. Quote, if the result of that is you go forward from today with the expectation that you will likely die in custody, that is an unavoidable byproduct of your heinous crimes and age at which you carried them out. As for Miss Hooper, Lyons' wife, it was reported she was sentenced to 7.5 years, but will be eligible for parole after just 4.5. Also reported that the accomplices in this, Ricky Smith and Jordan Bottom, were found not guilty of murder, but guilty of Lyons' assault and false imprisonment. And as for Thorne's apparent lieutenant, Nicholas Stefani, he was sentenced to 10 years in jail. Horrible story. But let me bring in somebody who knows a lot about this, a renowned predator catcher who does it the right way, Chris Hansen. Chris is the host of Takedown on TruBlu and the podcast Predators I've Caught. Chris Hansen, so good to see you. I have a feeling this just must make you sick.
Well, Jesse, thanks for having me first off, but this is so extreme on so many levels. It's the intersection of meth abuse and vigilantism. I mean, to extrapolate this and say this is an example of why vigilantes in the predator world are bad, yeah, of course, but this takes it to a whole different level, and there's so much more going on here. I mean, first of all, for the wife to make these scurrilous and false accusations, and it gets even worse because she alleges to the vigilantes that he not only sexually assaulted the girls, their girls, but also impregnated one of them. So it takes it to a different level. So you mix that and you fuel the fire with the fact that these guys are apparent meth users. And we know from the evidence in this country what that does to people. It's just a sad, violent, vicious, unnecessary criminal event.
And we've talked about cases before where somebody takes justice into their own hands against somebody who was convicted of a sex crime. This guy was completely innocent.
No, he was completely innocent. That's what I'm saying. This is the most extreme case I've ever seen because the guy was innocent. These guys aren't real vigilante predator hunters. They're nuts and they're psychotic humans on meth. So, to kidnap this guy and put him in the trunk of his car and take him to the house or the building on their property and torture him. I mean, scalding hot water, a chainsaw, knives were apparently used, all kinds of terrible things. And the guy didn't confess because he didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah. And I was actually curious, in your experience, have you seen groups like this before?
Nothing like this. I mean, this these are guys who take this activity to a whole different level. Yes, we've seen vigilantes mess up prosecutions. We've seen them do things that law enforcement agencies frown upon. But I think the vast majority of the groups, the amateur groups that go after predators, at least have a noble sense of trying to do what's right, trying to go after men who harm children. Yes, they do it for clicks. Yes, they do it for profit, but there is some good that comes out of it. If even if they can't prosecute these cases, they want to expose bad men doing bad things to children. But I mean, this takes it just to a whole extreme level I've never seen before.
Which makes it all the more important what you do, because I'm sure people out there are like, I'm going to do what Chris Hansen does, or I'm going to take the matter into my own hand. And it's so important that what you do, the process you go through in order to actually identify, communicate, capture these predators. If you can walk us through why that is so important, especially in light of these kinds of stories.
Well, I mean, again, Jesse, this particular story is just the absolute extreme end of the spectrum in its violence and gratuitous, drug use. But the reason we conduct ourselves the way we do, and we embed with law enforcement, and the decoys in these investigations are, law enforcement officers, it's to ensure the appropriate prosecution of these cases, to make sure these predators face the justice system and have to do some time, or at least be on probation, or be held accountable on the sex offender registry. And so often in the vigilante or the amateur predator catcher cases, prosecutors and law enforcement will shy away from it because they're difficult cases to make. They're just not done in the interest of justice. They're done in the interest of exposing and humiliating and getting clicks and making money on social media platforms.
What do a lot of the stories we cover make clear? It is that it is so important to know who you're surrounding yourself with, right? Well, that is why I am so excited to talk about our sponsor here on Sidebar, truthfinder.com. Wait till you hear about this, because honestly, with our content, I really can't think of a better service that can provide actual safety for you guys. So Truthfinder is one of the largest public record search services in the entire world. Their goal is to help people like you learn the facts about the people in their lives. Here's how it works. You go on their website, truthfinder.com, and you type in a name. For instance, your neighbor. Let's say your neighbor is me, Jesse Weber. Okay. So you type in my name, and within minutes, you get access to reports that include information like phone numbers, addresses, associates, previous arrests, criminal convictions. Also, you know what is really useful? If you type in an address, it tells you registered sex offenders that may live in that area too. And that is the point. Unless you use Truthfinder, you may never really know the reality about the people around you. Also, if you're in the online dating world, how scary can that be? Just going out with complete strangers. It's just genuinely a good idea to run a background check of potential dates, because before meeting them in person, you don't know what you're dealing with. And you can easily do that on Truthfinder. Now, this is what I'd want to tell you. You can get 50% off of confidential background reports right now. Just go to truthfinder.com/LC sidebar. Hope you check it out. And it's amazing what they were seemingly trying to do. Get that confession, as if that would have, I don't know what that would have done for them. I don't
know. It wouldn't have gotten a prosecution. I mean, let's just say take it to the extreme. If the guy was guilty, and these guys did get a confession out of him under duress, that would not be admissible in court. They would have messed up the entire case, at least under our judicial guidelines. That confession would be thrown out.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a strong argument they were going to kill him no matter what.
Right.
Walk me through, as you said, one of the most disturbing aspects is how this unfolded from the wife. And in your experience, there's one thing we've talked about a lot of sexual assault cases. And there's one thing, how important it is to get the account of a victim or a witness, because that's what sometimes gets the ball rolling. But the idea of falsifying that, not only does that create an issue of, you're falsely prosecuting someone or accusing somebody, but here, look at what the consequences could be. Have you ever seen in your experience, all the years of predator catching, somebody giving you a false tip about somebody?
Well, I think it's happened. I don't recall specifically a case in my experience, Jesse, where somebody has phoned in something on another person, false accusations of predatory activity, sexual assault, or those types of things. But it has happened. And when you have an amateur who's tried to do this, who is excited to pick up the tip and doesn't check it out, that possibility is always there. Again, we need to operate with probable cause. We need to have these investigations conducted with the cooperation of law enforcement to ensure that these guys are prosecuted appropriately at the end of the day. And that, at the very least, depending on the guy's background and history and what he's done before, somebody who gets caught in one of our investigations might get probation and registration as a sex offender on the low end. They might go to prison on the high end. It just depends on the venue, where we're at, and what this guy has done in his past.
Mm. And when you read about this and you hear about what was testified to, about what their plan was, what they wanted to do
horrendous.
to him.
At the end of the day, I mean, obviously it's getting a lot of attention because it involved vigilantes going after who they thought was a predator. And so that, checks all the boxes for massive attention here. But at the end of the day, this is a case where a bad woman who was addled by meth got together with some bad guys, lied about her husband to take him out of the picture for whatever motive she had. But, they got all these kids who now are living without a father who was wrongly accused and then killed by these drug crazed, quote unquote vigilantes. They're not even real vigilantes. It seems to me that they were a group of very violent drug users who, acted this way as some sort of cover, for whatever else they were doing as well.
That's a very, very well said to try to explain what was going on with them. Listen, if you want to see it the right way, if you want to see it done professionally, check out Chris Hansen, host of Takedown on TruBlu. You can also check out the podcast Predators I've Caught with Chris Hansen. Chris, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks so much for coming on, my friend.
I appreciate it. We'll see you soon.
See you soon. All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now in this episode of Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.